President Trump is firing back after the Senate overturned his national emergency declaration at the southern border. The rebuke passed easily after 12 Republicans broke ranks. The measure now heads to the Oval Office, where the president is expected to veto it. CBS News chief congressional correspondent Nancy Cordes has the latest.
For me, this is a constitutional question.
Utah's Mitt Romney was one of 12 Senate Republicans who broke with the president today.
The joint resolution is passed,
voting against his emergency declaration.
This declaration is a dangerous precedent.
The president responded with one word: veto.
We're going to have hundreds of miles of wall up fairly soon.
The split in the president's party has less to do with the wall than the money he wants to use to build it. By declaring a national emergency, Mr. Trump gave himself the power to redirect billions of dollars that Congress had already authorized for other military construction projects, from Hawaii to Kuwait.
We don't know which ones.
Senators tried to get details today from the acting defense secretary.
Do you have a list of those projects yet, Ms. Secretary?
Senator, I don't have a final list of those projects.
Well, obviously, I think it'd be important to all of us to understand which projects would be sacrificed even in the short run.
The House and Senate may have voted against him, but the president was still in high spirits today. He knows it would take 2/3 of Congress to overturn his presidential veto. Texas Democrat Joaquin Castro. At this point, you don't have a veto-proof majority. So where do you go from here? What are your other options if you want to try to stop the president?
Well, the first thing is that, you're right, it's going to be very tough, but we're going to give it a shot.
Nancy Cordes joins me now from Capitol Hill. So, Nancy, were there any surprises out of the 12 Republicans who ultimately broke ranks with the president?
Well, Elaine, there were a few Republicans who didn't reveal which way they were going to vote until right at the very end, but they were Republicans that we kind of had our eye on. I think what was most startling about the roster of Republicans who voted against the president at the end of the day is that they really come from across the ideological spectrum, from moderates like Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Susan Collins of Maine to more libertarian types like Rand Paul of Kentucky, and then you've got some real rock-ribbed conservatives on that list, like Mike Lee of Utah. So, these Republicans had different reasons for voting against the president's declaration. Some of them said they just didn't believe that there was truly an emergency at the border. Others said that the president's action was unconstitutional, that he just didn't have the right to do what he did and make an end run around Congress, even if they agree with them that there is an emergency and that there do need to be more funds dedicated to building a wall at the border. So lots of reasons why Republicans came down the way that they did. And let's not forget that the majority of Republicans still stuck with him and argued that there are decades of precedents here and that any president has the authority to declare a national emergency whenever he wishes.
Well, GOP Senator Tom Tillis ultimately voted no, despite saying that he'd go against the president a few weeks ago. How did Republicans convince him to stay with the party?
He says that he met with the president, vice president, spoke with them, was working with the White House, and that they addressed some of the concerns that he had. And he went even further, said that actually it was very gracious of them to work with him as closely as they did after he wrote an op-ed a few weeks ago, basically blasting the idea of the declaration of a national emergency. There has been some reporting out there as well that he may have been facing some pressure, that conservative groups may have been threatening that they would find a primary candidate to run against him in his next Senate race if he didn't stick with the president. And I think that just kind of shows you the difficult political calculus that Republicans have been making all the way along. And it's part of the reason that the Senate's Majority Leader Mitch McConnell urged the president not to take this step in the first place months ago, because he knew that it would end up dividing the party in some potentially painful ways.
It played out just as he said it would. Well, Nancy, as we heard in your piece, Democratic Congressman Joaquin Castro is urging the House to try to overturn the president's veto. What kind of battle can we expect there?
Well, we can expect a delayed battle for starters because the House and Senate are going to be on recess next week. So they wouldn't hold a vote to try to overturn the president's veto until they get back in late March. Beyond that, it's hard to see. They picked up a handful of Republicans in the House the first time around. It's hard to see that they would suddenly be able to pick up dozens more, which is what they would need in order to get the two-thirds vote to overturn a presidential veto. So this is going to be more of a symbolic effort. They know that it is probably doomed, but they still think that there is an important reason to go forward because they believe that these votes in the House and Senate against the president's declaration of a national emergency are going to have an impact on the court cases that are playing out and will be playing out for years. They think that those votes are going to send an important message to judges that Congress doesn't believe that there actually is an emergency and that the president, by declaring one, was clearly trying to make an end run around lawmakers.
All right, Nancy Cordes on Capitol Hill. Nancy, thank you.
You're welcome.